This passage jumped out at me a few years ago and said, preach me. It really helped me to understand better who I am.
Yes.
The Lord has given me, in Isaiah 54, Isaiah chapter 50, verse 4, the Lord has given me the tongue of the learned, the tongue of the teacher, that I should know how to speak a word in season to him that is weary. He waketh me morning by morning. He waketh mine ear to hear as the learned. The Lord God has opened mine ear, and I was not rebellious, neither turned away back. I gave my back to the smitters, and my cheeks to them that plucked off the hair. I hid not my face from the shame and spitting. The Lord God has given me the tongue of the learned, the tongue of the teacher. A post-captivity passage that Isaiah gives us here. And I want you to think with me for a few minutes this morning on the thought, thanking God for the tongue of the learned.
Talk, girls, talk.
For the tongue of the learned. For the tongue of the teacher. For the gift, for it is a gift. And I didn't realize what a gift it is and it can be to all of us until really I was where some of you are. I was a youngster in seminary, and there at Divinity School at Vanderbilt University, served a little church almost 7 miles away in a place called Shelbyville, Tennessee, walking horse capital of the world, they claim it to be. And in August, you get all of the aroma of walking horses in that little town. But there was a man in that church that when I first went there, and I was young and a senior in college, I didn't realize that I was a boy. I thought I was a man. And there was a big fella in the church. I stayed there almost 10 years, just a tad under 10. And he was huge, big mandingo type of fellow. And he was considered a playboy.
Bye-bye.
And one day I had to chastise him in the choir. He was singing in the choir, and I was trying to preach, and he was misbehaving with one of the females. And I stopped preaching and turned around and said to him, obey us, sir, obey the worship, or get out of here. He was a deacon. Now, there are all kinds of deacons. Churches have all kinds of deacons. Just like there are all kinds of preachers.
Talk about it.
So he got mad and got up and left. And I had trouble with him for a few years there, because you see, you're in a kinfolks church and all these kinfolks, friend folks, and friendship, kinship. All of it takes precedent over lordship with them.
Yes, sir. Right there.
And I said I was a boy. I didn't realize what a boy I was, but I didn't back down from any of them. So he said to me, he stopped coming and got mad. I knew he wouldn't gamble every Saturday night, but he stopped coming. He used to come, gamble, and then come and sing and pray on the deacon. But he stopped that. But some years later, he started coming back, and we became friends, and Some years later, when I resigned, he said to me, he came up and it was about 6 feet 8 to 250 or more. And he came and grabbed me in a bear hug and cried like a baby. And he said, I know what you're going to leave us, but you're going to do something better at the big state university. But he said, promise me one thing, that as long as you live, that I know, and we know you're going to teach primarily people who are not of our race. But don't forget us. For God has given you the gift of teaching. And please, don't give it all to the other people. Now, this big old body-busting African-American, I looked at him and I went back and did his funeral some years ago. But I have been reminded of his words constantly, that God has given you something that is special that our people need, and please don't give it all to the other people. The tongue of the learner, the gift of the teacher. The Hebrew word for tongue here is language. God has given me and you the gift of language, the tongue of the language. You are the ones who will start teaching at the spiritual level, try to take them from kindergarten to high school in the church. That's going to be your job, is to teach them. Now, I know you all got your guns cocked to go preach. But dearly beloved, if you don't teach, there won't be any much need for teaching. If you don't believe it, go into a church where they don't teach and try to preach. And it's like preaching in a cemetery.
Yes, sir.
It's like preaching in a tomb, empty tomb. This prophet Isaiah raises some issues for me that took me a while to understand why I needed to thank God for the gift, the gift of the tongue of the learned. One reason was that I was struggling with the class issue. And you struggle with that. That's why so many of you have a hard time dealing with learning. Because somebody has told you, you don't want to know more than the people you're going to serve.
Talk, Earl, talk.
You don't want to get in trouble, because when they find out that you know more, they get scared of you.
Talk, man, talk.
And they say ugly things behind your back.
Talk, Earl.
But if you understand here that why it is important, it is a class distinction, because the learned, there is a difference between the learned and the unlearned. The unlearned are never able to see and interpret and give explanation to what the learned have seen. And I don't apologize for that. And you ought not apologize for that. Because you see what he says is, he doesn't say that God has given me the gift of the tongue of the learned for my own self-aggrandizement.
Come on now.
And that's what some of us wanted for. We wanted to showboat. We wanted to showboat. And that's what most African Americans, if we are not careful, we will have to ask, why do we come to school to get these degrees anyway? We want to do it to where we can say to the church that we have them. Not the knowledge, but the credentials. And there is a difference. There's a difference in the tongue of the learned and tongue of the degree holder. The learner understands, is learned from, and this is what happened to Isaiah. Isaiah has learned from captivity.
Talk, man, talk.
He has learned from the school of the University of Adversity. He's not talking about his degrees. He's talking about what he has learned. And he says, one of the things I have learned is that there is a difference between, there's just as much difference as night and day between those who understand, number one, they understand the gift. That is a gift. It is not something, this tongue is not something of learning, of the learned, is not something you achieved by yourself. Yes. It is something that God gave you. Yes. Just as God gave you the voice to sing, God has given some of us the voice to teach. Yes. And when the teacher opens his or her mouth, the student is prepared to hear. But unless you have been to the University of Adversity, all of those of you who want these mega churches and all of this glitter and all of this pomp that comes with it, and of course I understand you want the money that comes with it, but let me share with you that's fleeting. And that's what the prophet learned in the University of Adversity, that everything is fleeting. Yes. Listen at him in the 40th chapter. Listen to his teacher. This is what his teacher says to him. His teacher is God. His teacher is Yahweh. His teacher says to him as he sits with his people down in the oppressive seats of slavery. His teacher says to him, do me a favor, prophet. And he says what? Now this is some assignment to give a prophet when you are sitting with your people in the Saint Asylum of oppression. The teacher says to him, comfort ye. Comfort ye, my people. What? What did you say? We all crazy down here. And you want me to comfort these people? These people who won't even, they're so depressed they won't sing. They've hung their harps on willow trees and said we cannot sing his songs in a strange land. And you wanted me to comfort them? Some of them have been down here smoking strange things, trying to get comfort, and you want me to comfort them? And a lot of them are mad at you, and they've said ugly things about you. Telling you about it. They've called you some ugliness, and you want me to comfort them? He says, comfort.
Yes, sir. Good.
And he said, don't raise your voice, don't yell at them.
That's good, Earl. That's good.
They've been whipped enough. Speak tenderly to them. This is a pastoral care moment, isn't it? Comfort them. Comfort them. But it's a gift. And he says here, he says, it's the gift, it's the tongue